And will the clerk please call the roll?
Director of Community Development Committee.
Councilmember Gretchen Davis.
Present.
Councilmember John Hagnow.
Present.
Councilmember Carol Kerr.
Here.
Councilmember Aaron Permet. Councilmember Dan Sullivan.
Here.
Councilmember Valerie Thisted. Mayor Riley.
Present.
There are 6 members present.
Thank you. Anyway, our first item on the agenda is a discussion with the general manager and I think operations
Close enough, we'll get there.
director from Arapahoe Basin, and Alan Hensroth and Tony Camparano. So with that, I'll turn it over to you. And welcome.
Thank you, guys. Well, thanks for having us. You know, John asked us to speak for about 10 minutes about, you know, what to expect from A Basin this winter. And Tony is Director of Community Planning and Development. Just to start, we're really impressed and amazed with all you guys have done. You know, it seemed like such a long shot to form a town to me. And I really applaud you guys. I think you've done tremendous work and can't wait to see how the next several years go. So kudos to you. So, you know, as far as what to expect from Arapahoe, you know, maybe we should just kind of frame this a little bit too. We feel very much a part of this Keystone community. You know, Tony and I drive through Keystone twice every day to and from work. I worked for Keystone for a number of years. I started out my career working at Keystone and spent 5 years there before I went up to Arapahoe Basin. And of course, Arapahoe Basin and Keystone in those days were one company. So if you didn't experience that back then, it was really very different. So, you know, for those of us who were around back then, it's, you know, this is where it all started for many of us that work at Arapahoe Basin. But, you know, maybe I should talk about the elephant in the room first, which is Alterra. And, you know, it's been a amazingly confusing process for lots of people, I think. And, you know, last year, the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, my boss called me and said, "Hey, I think I'm ready to sell the ski area after owning it for 27 years." And, you know, that was quite a shock. And as I worked through that with him, you know, I came to realize it really was time for Dream, our parent company. They were ready to sell. And Alterra was ready to buy. And I think Alterra is a great company. I'm really excited that they are the ones that are purchasing A Basin. I think they're going to really enable us to focus on what our strengths are. And I think they're going to let us focus also on and help us on some areas we need to improve. So we're extremely excited about the Alterra deal. You know, that was announced. We signed the deal in February, and the DOJ had to be involved. It fit their criterion for a transaction that they wanted to be involved with. They did a phase 1 review of it. At the end of that phase 1 review, you know, they can say, okay, you guys are good, or they can say, hey, we're going to take a much longer look, deeper look. And that's what they did. And that's what's been going on since, I think, end of April, beginning of May, sometime back there. So in that whole process, we're not even really supposed to be talking to Alterra, at least about anything. There is a little bit of work amongst a very small group of people in the two organizations that are planning for the transition and the new integration. But essentially, you know, since that time, we've still been working for Dream, and Alterra has not been in the picture at all. So, you know, I think what's very confusing is I think most members of the public think that's already a done deal, and it hasn't been. So we are working through that. We anticipate being done with DOJ and the deal closing before the end of the year. And I look forward to moving in that process because we're just kind of on hold for all this time period. So So it's an interesting deal. We are excited about Alterra, though I think they're gonna be a great company for us and really help us with the next few things that we're going to do. As far as what to expect for us this winter, generally it's gonna be business as usual. We had a relatively light capital summer. A lot of the stuff that we did was behind the scenes stuff, those non-sexy projects that are, you just gotta do. We did still not quite finished, but we got a major rebuild going of our water treatment plant. And we had a big culvert that was failing, and so we had to, have Stan Miller came in and helped us replace that. So there were other things going on. We've built an incredible, bottom to top to bottom looped mountain biking trail, and that's just finished, and people are loving riding that. And then as far as what the skier might see, for several summers since we built the Beavers, we've just been out there fine tuning those graded areas, cleaning up the ground surface and taking one or two more trees here and there. So, I think the graded skiing out in the Beavers is a place you'll see some change if that's the stuff you like to ski. So as far as other things go, because this deal, the way it's taken so long to get through, there's not any change to Icon Pass access for this year. And we're going to be doing what we always do. And I do know that Alterra is buying a basin because they like it. Their leadership group, a lot of them ski there regularly, and we know it. And they've told me they want a basin in their portfolio. They don't want to change and create something different. They like it just the way it is. So I'm very excited to move forward with that. So maybe I'll introduce Tony next, and he's going to talk about a couple big things brewing that you might be interested in, our master development plan and parking reservations.
Thank you.
Sure.
Everyone loves talking parking reservations. It's one of the most exciting things. Thank you again. My name is Tony. One of the things that I've had the pleasure of doing in Arapahoe Basin for my career, which has been over 25 years up at the ski area, is I've been able to help with some of the short-term and long-term planning with services at the ski area. I act as one of our first liaisons with the Forest Service, which is always a priority to the ski area, whether it's in long-term or short-term planning. The parking thing, one of the other things I get to do is I get to sit on the Summit Transit Board and talk a lot about public transportation. And obviously when we talk about that, we talk about being neighbors with Keystone because of the importance of the Summit stage in this area and the importance of highway safety in the US 6 corridor. And, John and I have had conversations, whether that's an Intermountain TPR or whether that's adjustments to the Summit stage. It's one of the reasons parking reservations is so important to us. We've tried everything we can do to improve the arrival experience in a basin and to get people off the highway as quick as we can in a way that makes them want to come back for another day of skiing. And we tried limiting day tickets. COVID taught us a bunch about reservations that we don't need to get into, but we really needed to make sure that everyone was invested in it, from our guests to our staff and to the community. So this year, starting on December 21st and ending on May 4th, every Saturday, Sunday, and holiday at the ski area, we're going to require a reservation to park in all lots. And we're working with a third-party concessionaire, Interstate Parking. They have an office in Breckenridge. They do a lot of parking reservations here in Summit County, including the Dillon Marina, the Frisco Marina, and some places in Breckenridge. We feel that they're going to be a really great partner. We think they're going to be turnkey and let us be a success with this in the first year of trying parking reservations. It's 48 days out of a 220 plus season. And so we're really looking to control the 12 busiest days of our season. And on the other parts of our season, as Alan and I oftentimes stand out in the parking lots on Saturdays and Sundays. You have a family of 4 that drives up from Denver. They spent 3 hours on the highway. They have a reservation for snow sports instruction. We don't have a place to put them. And we simply can't do that anymore. We want to spread out the arrival experience. We've talked a lot with other ski industry partners, Alta, Palisades, Crystal. They all tell us the same thing. They're going to hate you the first year. And then they're gonna realize what the system does to make sure that everyone has a spot when they wanna go skiing. So that's our intention with parking reservations. We're gonna be launching some information here on Thursday of this week. We're gonna be releasing a certain portion of parking reservations on November 1st of the season, and then releasing more each Monday before the next weekend to make sure that if people are watching Joe Gratz in open snow and there's going to be a big storm, they still have the opportunity to come up and ski. We're really hoping to improve public transport, average vehicle occupancy. We're hoping carpooling, which will give you a free reservation, is really going to increase, and partnerships with Snowstang, Tread Share, everything that not only the county public transit services are trying to improve upon, but Margaret Bowes and the I-70 Coalition, they're really behind this plan as well. They know that it's going to take cars off the highway, and hopefully less cars coming to A-Basin means less cars coming through the town of Keystone. So hopefully improving safety within the entire corridor. As far as longer-term planning goes, right before the Altera acquisition was announced, our senior leadership team had been working on our latest master development plan. It's the first one since 2012, it's kind of a 5 to 8 year look at what the ski area could potentially look like. It's not an approval of any projects within, but it's more of the Forest Service accepting our big picture idea of what sort of skier services we think we need and would improve the experience at A-Basin. So that's hopefully going to get some traction here. Again, we've been working with the Forest Service quite a bit to make sure that's a priority. And really what it is again, improving the experience by, we have some great learning terrain up at A-Basin that's mid-mountain. The Molly Hogan area is great, but we want to get more people up and into the high alpines so they can really experience what A-Basin is like. Learning how to ski underneath the shadow of the east wall, we think is going to be an experience that people will love. So we'll improve some liftway structures. We'll hopefully put some skier services mid-mountain, things like that we're hoping to improve the skier services. So it's going to take us a bit. Like I said, this is not a project approval. It's an acceptance of a big picture idea that we're going to work with the Forest Service for, the next probably 2 to 5 years, as we decide how we work in partnership with them. So, anything else you'd like to add?
No, that's pretty good. Really curious what questions you guys might have for us, or what we can do for you guys also.
I'll turn it over to the council. Anyone have any questions? Councilmember Hagan.
Thanks for being here today. Just 2 quick questions. Is there a cost for the reservations that you were mentioning? Is there a plan to increase cost in the future? And then have you looked into expanded pickup options and reduced travel time for public transportation outside of county sponsored options?
So to your first question, the reservations on those 48 days of the year are $20 made in advance on a website. Unless you have 4 more people in your car, then you still need a reservation, but it's going to be free. The beach reservations in the admin parking lot are going to operate much like they did last year on varying rates depending on the time of the season. Other ways to get the hill, we've had a partnership with Snowstang now going on almost 5 years. We've also, we're working with Tread Share, which is a ride sharing app. It's, if you would like to come to the ski area and you have 3 friends who are going to come up with you, this app gives you the opportunity to share a ride and come up. We're also working on a back-end version of that app with the CEO of Tread Share to make a platform just for our staff. And if staff will carpool as well, then they can use this and share the cost of rides there. We also shuttle our employees. A lot of our employees, whether new to the county, J1 or H2Bs, if they don't have vehicles, we run an employer shuttle. So we'll on the first runs of the morning be able to bring folks up to the hill via our own shuttles. And it's one of the most important things. I've talked to John, I've talked to Aaron Parmet about it. Having the town of Keystone represented on the Summit Transit Board is huge. The improvements, I believe, we are just getting back to pre-COVID levels of service with the Summit stage. It needs to be better. If we don't move our Summit stage program forward, then we're just going back to what we were in 2017. I do believe the proposal for microtransit that we're going to be rolling out in November is going to be a game changer. It's not necessarily going to affect this neighborhood to start during the pilot program, but if it's successful, I believe that same model could be used in this neighborhood.
Thanks, I appreciate you guys being here.
Yeah.
Quick question, do you have any sense of how many people park here and then ski there? Is that a common thing?
Yeah, we do have a very good sense, and we know just about exactly how many people ride the stage. Which is, should know that off the top of my head.
On the busiest Saturdays of last season, it averaged about 26 people riding the Swan Mountain Flyer between either the Razor Drive, the River Run, and A-Base.
And all the stage staff have told us about 15% of those people get on in Keystone and then ride up. So they're originating elsewhere, Breckenridge or Summit Cove.
But only 26,
Yeah, something like that.
so 15% would be like 2 or 3.
It's pretty small.
Pretty small.
Yes,
So, having driven past and seeing all the cars and some years parked along the highway, what is your plan for those people who show up without a reservation, and then kind of the extension of this? What are you gonna do when they start trying to park along the highway?
yeah, up the highway towards the basin.
Yeah, not here, but I'm just curious.
Sure. You know, that issue does still exist. It's nothing what it was, say, back in the late teens at the peak of the epic periods. We did have a few tough days with that. We involved State Patrol. We involved CDOT to help us. We don't have any authority outside the ski area boundary, but we do, we're getting the word out there pretty strongly about what the rules are in terms of parking reservations, and we've talked at length with the other resorts doing it. Again, Tony mentioned them out California Palisades and Solitude, I mentioned a few. And they've had good success, but that's not. And I think it's gonna happen a little bit, and I think it's probably gonna be less bad than it was this past year, for example. Yeah. There is with the reservations, not a side of it we like to talk about, but there is a carrot and a stick side of this. If people park illegally, at least within the ski area, there's a way that they have to pay. They're issued a violation and they have to pay a fee. And so, people are gonna have to cooperate. We don't like that. That's not what we're in this to do, but that's an integral part of it working in other places.
Any other questions? Well, thank you for coming today. I see a future where the town of Keystone and Arapahoe Basin will be even closer than probably you can imagine.
Yeah.
There's, our major resorts here, obviously, Keystone Mountain. But we're only, 6 miles away? And I see a tremendous opportunity to potentially partner together on many things. It's gonna take discussion at a later date, but.
Yeah, you bet. And we're open anytime. We'd come to any meeting you'd like us to, and participate, however you'd like us to participate. We do regularly count where our visitors come from.
Mhm.
About half of them come over the pass. And about half of them drive this one on their way up there. So, they come right through Keystone, a bunch of them.
Yeah, in the Epic mixed days, the Epic partnership days, we were well aware of that.
Yeah. Well, again, let us know. We can help. Reach out anytime. Tony and I are both very available.
Great.
All right.
Well, again, thank you for coming
Thank you.
today.
I'd love to say that much.
Next item is the discussion of town financials. I'll turn that over to the town manager.
Turn on my microphone here. Pull up our financials. Okay. So these are our financials, through September 30th of 2024. That includes our sales tax from July. We get the July sales tax around September 10th. August, we got October 10th, so forth and so on. So I'll start out just with our revenue. Well, I'll start out with our balances. Actually, you see here we have total cash in bank of 726,000. Actually, since then, we've gotten some significant payments and we're sitting at approximately 1.2 million in the bank right now. Sales tax receivables, the 382 includes 200,000. This is July tax, so includes 200,000 that we got from the county in July, which we've already paid back. So our actual sales tax revenues were 182, which were higher than projected by about 16,000. And I can tell you that our August numbers were higher than projected by close to 70,000. We'll see that in our next month's financials. Other than that, pretty much we've been moving along as expected. Pretty much every month our revenue seems to be a little bit higher than planned for, and our expenditures a little bit lower than expected, which is a great way to operate a town. Very few things jumped out at me in this one. As usual, our attorney contract, we didn't get that budget number right, but every dime we've spent has been well worth it. Everything else in general is coming in pretty much right at our expected numbers or slightly below our expected numbers. Yes, are there any questions, anything that jumped out to any council members that need explanation from this set of financials? We did, actually, I want to bring up one thing. We have workforce housing fund numbers appeared. We got our first SCHA payment. The payment was for $424,000. That was March through July. Less $90,000, which we contributed to the purchase of the SCHA building. It's not a lease; they actually purchased it. So it's that money will be ours, is ours for all kinds of purposes, and less our contribution to the operations of the SCHA. Next time you see this, we're going to have that fund broken out a little bit better because there's a 0.6% sales tax on what was Summit Preferred Measure 6B and a 0.125 sales tax, Summit Preferred Measure 15A. And they were both written a little bit differently, so there are slight limitations on how the money can be spent compared to each other. So those funds will be broken out based on the two ballot issues in our next financials. Any other questions about anything in the financials? Oh,
Councilmember Davis.
I think you clarified my question, but I wanted to double check we've actually received the money from housing.
yes, we have.
Oh, yeah,
Yep,
it's hard thought.
yeah, we're still, technically, everyone has signed the IGA. The board of the SCHA has a resolution changing the bylaws, incorporating everything in. The attorney didn't have it prepared for the meeting yesterday, but it'll be passed next meeting. We still vote, we still get the money, so the important things.
Councilmember Sullivan.
Yeah, at some point, it'd be great to, just a quick definition of the various components of the housing authority and what it can be spent on. You said that there's two funds, and then we're gonna have the 1, 2, 3 come up later today as well, which would be kind of a third fund. So just kind of understanding those, how they relate, because you're kind of going through the same kind of money as projects. But I mean, I don't need that now, but it'd be great to have
No,
a
it's
synopsis of that.
perfect timing because we've at the board meeting yesterday tasked the attorney for the housing authority to actually do that. So, probably our second meeting in November, I'll have that.
Include the 1, 2, 3.
Yes, yeah.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Next item is discussion of the revised town bylaws. Mr. Town Manager?
And I am going to let our town attorney, Jennifer Manson, lead this discussion.
Good afternoon, Mayor, council members. So in the agenda packet for the work session, our revised bylaws based on the discussion from last meeting, the October 8th meeting. You've met, several times to talk about how to change, how to amend the excused absences and absences policies. I don't know if it would be helpful to go through each of the different bullet points to talk about what was discussed last time and then where that is in the bylaws. Would that be helpful for everybody?
Oh, Councilmember Permit?
Mr. Mayor, I would propose that we move this discussion to the last item, as we have actual time relevant things versus the bylaws is referring to an issue that hasn't actually presented itself. We spent a great deal of time, and I would hate to see another extended discussion have us delay actual important matters.
I'm not sure this will take an extended amount of time today, but again, is that a motion you're making?
Yes, please.
Is there a second? You seconded it? Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember Permit?
while the concerns are valid, they pertain to, that are trying to be addressed by us, they pertain to problems that have not actually been present. They have not presented themselves. And the true fear as expressed by the initiators of this, that someone could be elected almost 2 years in the future, trying to abuse this, demonstrates the fact that this is absolutely not a time critical thing for us. And other concerns around virtual attendance, I literally proved that to you that that's not a concern because none of you supported it, and I didn't support it. I put the motion forward to see if anyone did. Got 0 votes. So what we've done is spend each of us in excess of 10 hours on this for a problem that does not yet exist and is not urgent. And we do have more urgent things, for example, fairs and dumpsters, that we should literally address all these things first before we address something that It's not urgent, that there isn't a problem for, and oh, by the way, it won't actually solve the problem. Why? Because we're looking to amend this and make a little majority vote on the bylaws. And if this worst case scenario were to happen, where we have Trojan horses coming in from Boulder, well, guess what? They can have another majority vote and revise the bylaws and eliminate any changes we made. So
All right, is there any other comments? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of delaying this discussion, please raise your hands. All those opposed? The motion fails, and we'll consider it now. Councilmember Sullivan.
I think you had asked, if, I know we've all read the material and the revised, and these were voted on, and I know it wasn't unanimous for almost any of them, but it was a recognition of, kind of the will of the council and the majority. There was at least one item that was kind of new, which was the requirement for, a quorum to be 100% represented. So that was the only one that was kind of new that I saw.
And I can touch on that. I mean, that one, the change there related to the discussion of the mayor shall work to ensure that no more than 3 members are remote at any time. And so related to that, the thought process is that you need to have at least 4 people present sitting at the meeting to have a quorum, or to count towards your quorum. You can't count, people who are attending remotely for your quorum or who are absent. I mean, we can do it a different way, but that's one way to do it. The other thought, and this is something that would be a question for your town manager or your clerk, is that there is time and effort that goes into setting up a meeting. And if you're only going to have 3 council members in attendance in person, then, you know, another option is to have it be a fully remote meeting.
So I think what you're saying is that you kind of backed into the same numbers with the
Yeah.
requirement for. Okay.
Any other comments? Councilmember Kerr.
Yeah, I was surprised at that as well. Can I clarify, it's not in the charter? I can find nothing about in-person requirement for a quorum. Is that accurate?
It's not related to a quorum. There is the requirement that the meetings are attended in person, you know, generally speaking, those are the sections of the charter that we talked about.
But nothing specifies that the quorum must be in person. So I thought a lot about this because I thought we sort of did handle this by the line whereas the mayor would make every effort to ensure that no more than 3 people were remote. So that made me think about a possibility. So Councilmember Davis and I have already indicated our intent to participate remotely on Thanksgiving week. There could be another one. So let's say just for the point of discussion, let's say that there were 3 people who were authorized to go remotely. That's the minimum that the max we'd like to keep it. 4 people were planning to be here in person. But for unanticipated reasons, whether it be a traffic accident, traffic conditions, illness, only 3 people are here when the meeting is about to start. So this rule, which would suggest that participating and voting cannot be considered part of the quorum, which I don't understand that alone. But it also would force the mayor to cancel the meeting, even though there were 3 people online ready to participate and vote. So therefore, I feel like it seems to me that our own policies are in contravention of each other. Too big a word, sorry. They just don't seem to mash up.
All right. Other comments? Thank you. Councilmember Higgins?
Yes, thank you. I would agree with the statement that was just made, but I did have a alternative question. Related to the bullet about all absences cannot exceed 4. I was a little confused by the new language. It seemed like the new language only covered of those excuse or those absences. So it didn't seem to take into the account the full intent of what we had discussed and voted on informally last meeting.
So the bullet point talks about, absences cannot exceed 4, and there are 2 excused absences for any reason, which is what is addressed in, the language below. And then there's an additional 2 unexcused absences, which isn't addressed in the language below, but it is addressed in 2.8B and in the charter.
Okay, so that's accounted elsewhere.
Yes.
Thank you.
Other comments? Would the, well, maybe, this would be an easier way to handle it. And that is, of the language presented, does anyone have any recommended changes to that language? And we could walk through it by the paragraphs specifically that were added and see if again, we get the majority thumbs up or thumbs down on those. Councilmember Sullivan?
Yeah, I think, Councilmember Clerk brings a good point. Because I do think we should be able to say it's a quorum.
Yeah.
If by mistake we had only 3 people. So I guess I'd like to put back into the other. So that'd be the only change I would recommend.
Let me ask you a question of the attorney, and that is, if that form requirement were eliminated, what would the impact be? Would it just simply mean that if there were only 3 members present at the meeting for whatever reason, that we could still have a quorum?
You could still have a quorum. You would have a problem though if you had any quasi judicial matters on your agenda, and those would have to be continued to another meeting.
So we can just leave that.
Well, we'd need to revise this paragraph because the paragraph is necessary for other reasons, but it would need to be revised so that people who are attending remotely would be considered for a quorum.
Are you referring to paragraph 2.5?
Yes. And then the question is, do you want that bullet point to be worked in some other fashion, some other manner? That bullet point is the mayor shall work to ensure that no more than 3 members are remote at any time.
Yeah, I think that needs to be in here. And I thought that was included, was not in 2.5. Is that another?
It's not anywhere else.
It seems to me we had already all agreed on that was, or the majority of us had agreed that was a good way forward. I prefer that to be moved in other than instead of the discussion of in-person quorums.
I could put it in I could add that to 2.8B. So 2.8 is a section that is labeled town council attendance and absences. C is if a council member is absent for both a work or, oh no, not C, sorry. D, members of town council that are absent from a meeting are encouraged to electronically participate in the meeting, subject to the requirements of an electronic participation policy. Members of town council who are participating electronically are not permitted to participate or vote on quasi judicial matters. And I could put then, the mayor shall work to ensure that no more than 3 members are remote or participating electronically at any one meeting.
Of the other changes, did anyone have any other suggestions? Not hearing any, then I'd like to just get a simple, with the one change that the town attorney provided, how many would be in favor of adopting these changes in a final draft, for consideration at the next meeting? All those in favor, could you please give me a thumbs up?
Next meeting.
Next council meeting after this one today. 2, 3, 4, 5. All those opposed?
I'm not voting.
All right. By a vote of 5 to 1, we will, the staff is directed to put the final changes in and consider it at the first meeting in November.
Do we need to record an abstention?
I need to look at the.
You know, this isn't a vote.
It's true. Yeah, okay.
It's not a vote.
You're right.
So,
Do you, and another question is, would you like that on the?
council meeting.
Right, okay,
I think we've discussed this enough
Yeah.
in work session.
Okay.
All right. The next item, is a discussion of Prop 123 ordinance, and I'll turn it over to the town manager.
Okay, this, actually, we're gonna bring up in our regular meeting too. The date to choose to opt in with the commitment for Prop 123 is November 1st. So, depending on how the board, we have to have a decision whether to opt in or not at our regular meeting. But I want to discuss Prop 123 during the work session, answer your questions, talk about what our town's commitment should be. So Prop 123 was approved by the Colorado voters to fund affordable housing. It provides funds in, let me pull this list up that I have. You can use it for land banking. You can use it for housing equity, helping people offset people who are actually in the housing already, offset the equity discrepancies in their housing. It can be used for concessionary debt. So that's basically funding of building of houses. Debt funding or actual purchase of modular units are specifically called out. And it includes planning capacity grants. There's a lot of money in Prop 123. Not much of it has been given out yet, which is good. We'll be ready to jump all over that. But there are hundreds of millions of housing dollars available through Prop 123. In order to participate in Prop 123 dollars, it operates on 3-year cycles, and we're in the first year of the first 3-year cycle right now. Most towns opted in or chose not to opt in at the end of last year, the November 1st timeline, then we can opt into this first 3-year cycle by setting a 2-year commitment for the next 2 years for 2025 and 2026 of providing for a baseline number of houses. And the baseline is a 3% increase per year over the 3-year cycle. So for us, it would be a 6% increase in the housing we have here right now. The state has already done all the real legwork on how much housing we have and what we would need in order to do that commitment. And our commitment would be to provide by January 1st of 2027, 7 new affordable housing units. The units just need to be permitted at that point. They actually don't have to be occupied. It's kind of funny to set the baseline, they take occupied units. To meet the deadline, they take permitted units. So they give towns and municipalities a little bit of leeway there. As long as we're building it, they're happy. If we don't meet the commitment, what happens is we would become ineligible for the funding cycle that would be the 2027 funding cycle. We would have to recommit and we could get in on the next 2 years of the second cycle. That's the entirety of the penalty. If we get grants awarded in the next 2 years and don't meet the commitment, we don't have to give the grants back. We still have to use them for designated purposes, but the penalty really is pretty minimal for not meeting your housing commitment. As I said, the commitment needs to be filed by November 1st. So the board, I'm going to ask you to take action later in the meeting to instruct staff to file a commitment for the 7 units. It's actually 6.5, but they round up, can't build a half unit. We can go after this money right away to purchase the land that this building is sitting on as part of our land banking policy. Now, one interesting thing about Prop 123 is it's very much affordable housing is defined as 80% of AMI. However, they specifically allow rural resort towns to petition for a waiver of that. Summit County is currently in the process of petitioning for a waiver. Frisco has successfully petitioned for a waiver to raise that AMI level for our commitment purposes. We will most likely petition for a waiver too once we're in the program. Are there any questions about this? How it works?
Councilmember Sullivan.
I read all the way through it. I mean, it sounds like a great program. There's no downside because we just get kicked out, don't have to pay anything back. What kind of money are we talking about? Do you have any sense of, I mean, I know it's grants, we apply, but I mean, we're talking.
To this point already, pretty much the largest they've awarded have been around $1 million. But as I said, there's a lot of money in this. So I think most of the grants have been for land banking or planning purposes. That's why they're relatively lower. I think as people are getting a hold of this, they'll be coming in for significantly larger grants in the several $1 million range would be my guess.
Would the grants also pay for some of the building costs of the housing units as well?
They can, yes, they can be used either for straight up purchase of modulars or as a gap funding as part of the capital stack that's put together to build. So building, land banking, and planning basically are what the town of Keystone would look for.
So potentially, if we were to decide to trying to purchase the land around this building, almost 6 acres, as part of a land bank. You could get probably between $1 and $2 million out of the state for that. And then the planning of the development of that, the state would pay a good portion of, and then as well, some portion of the construction cost.
That is our hope, absolutely. So it's still a competitive grant process, but as I said, there's a lot of money in this program.
Councilmember Hagan.
Thank you. What defines a unit? Is it a building or like a room, a bed space?
An individual residence. So a 1-bedroom and a 3-bedroom are still a unit.
And you said as long as we're building there healthy, we don't have to actually build, right, a physical structure, and the time and money commitment for that. We could look into alternative options that wouldn't necessarily require building a new building.
Yeah, absolutely. We could buy down deed restrictions on pre-existing units. That's probably I can't think of any other way off the top of my head to have units other than build or buy, or like I said, buy a deed restriction on a pre-existing.
Or potentially annex an area.
Yes, potentially say annex an area that's already chock full of deed restricted units.
Would that increase, so hypothetically, if there's an area near town that has a significant amount of deed restricted units and we were to annex them, would the number of those units automatically increase? Or, so let's say it was 10 and we annex that area, we'd have 10 new affordable housing units.
We would have 10 units within our jurisdiction. As far as, I'd have to really run this one past attorneys, but my understanding is they consider the number of units in our jurisdiction. And if we have 10 more units in our jurisdiction, that.
They compare it at point A and point B.
Yeah.
And if there's a 7 increase, then we're good.
Yep.
Cool.
And then in the next cycle, our target would be higher.
And our next cycle, our target would be higher. But as I said, I'd have to run that past our attorney, who would probably have to run it past the attorneys in the Department of Housing, because they probably haven't even considered that question.
Councilmember Kerr.
Okay, it seems like something we don't want to miss out on for all the reasons you have identified, and the fact that there's very little downside. But to help me understand, what do you mean by permitting? Does that mean a building plan has been permitted?
Yeah, it has been issued a building
Okay,
permit.
so we're not talking CO, we don't even have to have any construction done. Well,
Yeah.
how does that work with land banking? That's where you lost me.
Well,
Cool idea.
you can use the money for these various purposes. And
Oh, it's a different category. Okay.
yeah, so the land banking, we could use all of the Prop 123 money just to land bank,
Okay.
but we still have to somehow come up with 7 units over the next 2 years. Doesn't have to be on that land, just has to be in town. We have to come up with, we have to increase our housing stock by 3% a year. The land that we use the money for would have to be used to build affordable housing, but it doesn't need to be used to build affordable housing to meet that cycle's commitment.
Okay, so it sounds like it increases our options. And yet at the same time, we still have to come up with 7 additional units.
Exactly.
That didn't change. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Davis.
7 realistic.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, we just, our first payment was 400,000 from the Housing Authority. We're going to be bringing in approximately $1.2 million next year off of that. We're going to bring in, close to another, I would guess, 600,000 this year off of that. There are ways to hit 7 units with that, even without construction, so.
Councilmember Hagan.
I guess moving off of what Councilmember Davis said, one thing that's been in the back of my mind in that I'm concerned about, right, with this is the 4A proposition that's, happening right now in county. The school board has presented a plan for, I think it's 60 units at $40 million, right? It's almost $1 million per unit. It's like 787 or something, right? I forget the exact number. That's a lot of money, right? So I don't want like that number to be the one that we're kind of planning on for the town, right? There's more economical options, it seems.
I don't want to critique or criticize their proposal. I'm sure a lot of thought went into it.
Sure.
But yes, there are all sorts of options and including modular. I mean, some of this money has been used to actually develop some new modular factories in Colorado. We are going to have in-depth discussions about our housing plan over the course of the winter. And we'll lay out the options and the opportunities to cost analysis of different types of buildings, different types of housing, issues like that.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? All right, well, thank you. We'll be revisiting this again this evening. Next item on the agenda is discussion of natural medicine, Mr. Town Manager.
And I will pass this off to our town attorney, Jennifer Manson. Again, I was gonna make a comment about hippies, but I won't.
All right, so this is an overview of the natural medicine regulations in the state of Colorado. In 2022, Colorado voters passed the state's Natural Medicine Health Act. This act decriminalizes and regulates the use of certain natural medicines, such as psilocybin for individuals over the age of 21. It legalizes personal use, cultivation, possession of psilocybin, and other related natural medicines. In addition, it establishes a framework for therapeutic use, including licensed healing centers, trained facilitators, and other uses such as cultivation and testing. The regulation scheme is pretty detailed. So after the voters approved Proposition 122, then the state went to work and put in place a regulatory framework. So the DORA, the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies, regulates individuals for licensing to administer psilocybin, and that happens at healing centers. Then the Department of Revenue is responsible for issuing licenses essentially to the businesses for the uses, for the healing centers, for the cultivation facilities, product manufacturers, and testing facilities. Those are the four different business operations related to natural medicine. Is a healing center where somebody goes to get a natural medicine treatment. There's a licensed professional who administers the treatment, and that's where people go to get the psilocybin. Then there are the other uses, which are cultivation, the testing, and the product manufacturers. The regulations also say that local governments can put in place time, place, and manner regulations related to these four different uses. And that's why this is a discussion item for you all, is that Keystone needs to consider amending their land use code for putting in place regulations related to those four different types of uses.
You say, sorry. Consider or obligate.
Well, yes, there is an obligation, yes. This is challenging. This is something that the community development director and I have been talking about, because some of these uses are not clearly compatible necessarily to the town of Keystone's zone districts and current zoning. A lot of the municipalities in the metro area, what people are doing or what jurisdictions are doing are putting healing centers, allowing them to go where a medical office would be. Because what I understand is a healing center is, you know, you make an appointment with a professional, you go in and it's a therapeutic appointment. So it would be akin to a medical office type of use. The other uses are, I understand that other jurisdictions are putting them in the places that would be industrial or maybe light industrial areas. Keystone doesn't really have any areas that are light industrial or industrial. In addition, we don't know necessarily, this is all new. And so we don't know what the impacts of these uses are going to be on other neighboring property owners. You know, are there going to be, I don't think that there are going to be any odors coming from these other types of uses. But again, it's something that is brand new and is not known. And it's brand new everywhere. I mean, this isn't a use that is in other states. You know, Colorado is one of the first states to allow for this natural medicine use. So again, new territory. Lindsay and I are working together to come up with some, you know, initial thoughts on regulations and also maybe consider other things that we can do, given the fact that this is a new area, new uncharted territory, and we are in the process of working on our comprehensive plan. So maybe this is something that we could study a little bit further before putting regulations in place.
Due by the end of the year.
Yes, I mean, it's that people may get licenses, and so what the risk is somebody would get a license, want to operate a facility here, they'd have to either buy property or negotiate a lease and want to operate up here. So that's what would have to happen. I mean, if we didn't have anything in place, we're not going to get, you know, the state isn't going to be going around to jurisdiction to see if regulations have been adopted. It's whether somebody comes to town and wants to put this in operation.
So it isn't an issue of violating state law. It's an issue of, we would be at risk potentially if someone were to come in, and if we didn't have the regulatory mechanism in place, that they could basically establish something almost anywhere in Keystone.
Right. Yeah.
Councilmember Kerr.
So if it was in here, I missed it, and I apologize. To be licensed to run one of these centers requires, there's some vague language about having trained educational and experiential requirements and qualifications in order to get a license. What are those? Do you need to be a medical health care professional, or do we know?
Well,
Do they leave it pretty open?
we do know, I don't know off the top of my head, so I'd have to look at the regulations here.
may have found it.
It starts on page, there's an overview, so I included, kind of a summary, and it starts on page 48 of the packet.
Well, there's a
That
line,
talks about unauthorized.
there's a line that says, "Well, must not require a separate professional license or degree." And you have to have training in drug interactions, like, does that sound?
I mean, it is a regulated license through DORA, so there is gonna be an application process. I don't know what the specific requirements are.
I'm not trying to look at that. It's just, there's a lot of material and there is, jump out at me.
Yeah.
And thank you.
All right, other, Councilmember Hagan.
Thank you. I understood the comments you were making about establishing regulations and policies for our town for the consumption use and those four aspects. I was wondering specifically for individuals. I know that the laws talking about the 12 by 12 square foot area. Are we able to restrict that, or is that would that supersede our town desires to restrict that?
Well, those are gonna be, that is the decriminalized portion of the, use of natural medicine. You know, we could maybe put something in our town land use code about that has provisions in there that you're only allowed to do that. But, you know, that's something to think about as well. Otherwise, it would be, you know, violation of state law to do that.
In other words, we can't restrict the square footage or where someone in their private residence chooses to cultivate.
Right.
Councilmember Davis.
How them in the multifamily facility, multifamily building.
So in a condo type units. I mean, no,
But would there be anything to prevent in the condo association from putting restrictions in the building?
I would think that they could do something. That's a contract.
Right. Other questions? Councilmember Sullivan?
Just a comment, so today's work session, where we're at, we're trying to decide.
This is just information, really, questions about it as a whole. And I think, you know, it's letting you know that this is coming and that, I will work with the community development director to put together a plan for addressing that. Yeah.
Because I do think there's risk there, from what I heard.
Yeah, there is risk there, and, you know, one option is a moratorium. So that's one option.
Could we legally put a moratorium until we got the land
I mean, that's
comprehensive plan in place?
one thing we could do, and, I haven't looked at it in a lot of detail. But I think we have a good argument for a moratorium in that we're a brand new municipality. We do not have a comprehensive plan in place. And so that would be part of the comprehensive plan is to study it. And, you know, the risk there is that somebody would want to operate in Keystone and wouldn't be allowed to. But I don't know if that is a significant risk for Keystone. I mean, I would imagine it's probably not that significant.
Councilmember Kerr?
And moratorium should identify the time.
Yeah.
Okay. What are our options?
You know, moratoriums can be, it's not a set amount of time that moratoriums are permitted, but you can't let a moratorium go on for a long period of time. And if Keystone has a moratorium in place because of the comprehensive plan, then it should be only extended until the time that the comprehensive plan is completed and the town can adopt then appropriate regulations.
Councilmember Hagan,
The risk that we're talking about, hypothetically, we don't have something in place by January first and somebody does open a business, say January second, and we enact, our land use, restrictions on January 10th. So after they've already opened the business, would they be grandfathered in or would they have to adjust their operations to meet the restrictions?
Well, if there wasn't, if the decision is not to put in place any regulations and the decision is to go with the moratorium, that would be adopted prior to, effective on January 1. So there wouldn't be that lag. But if there was a delay, then, I'd have to look at the code as far as what it says in terms of a lawful, what's the word I'm thinking of?
Sounds like non-conforming.
No, it's a,
lawful taking.
no, it's a lawful, it's a use that is no longer allowed, but it was allowed at one time.
Pre-existing non-conformers.
Yeah. So what about that? That they can continue, yeah.
All right, then, if you're looking for some guidance,
Well, yeah, I think really Lindsay and I probably need to, this is more informative. I think I'm hearing some concerns about this, about the use and, like I said, we are going through the process of the comprehensive plan. Right now, there are really no good zone districts for some of these uses. At least 3 of the 4 uses. So,
let me see if this would summarize from a council perspective, and obviously continue as you're doing with working with the community development director. I think the council would like to understand a little bit more about moratoriums and the feasibility of a moratorium until the completion of a comprehensive plan, and the legality/risk associated with that, as well. Is there anything else that's okay with you guys?
Yeah, do we have the timeline to get this done before the end of the year?
yeah, if it's a moratorium, it's an emergency ordinance that's put in place. So, yeah, definitely there is time.
Otherwise, we're making decisions with blindfolds on, so.
All right. Any other comments or questions? Great.
Your Honor, if I can, before we go to the next
Yes.
topic, I just got an email from Tony C. And he misspoke about the number of people who get on the bus here and go up.
Yeah.
Keystone. It is 26 who get on here
All right.
and go up out of approximately 180 on the people.
All right.
Still low.
It's still low.
It's essentially 26 cars parking.
Well, it doesn't also address the issue of how many people from Keystone actually went up on that too, so. All right, thank you. Then, next item on the agenda is discussion of 1041 regulations. Town manager?
And I will pass this off to our community development director, Lindsay Hirsch, and our planning council.
Jennifer, would you start?
Okay, so this is another item that's discussed with you several work sessions previously. The 1041 regulations is essentially a land use tool, another tool in your toolbox for regulations of development within the town, and it's typically state type regulations. So the last time that we were before council on this was at, a meeting, I don't have the date of that meeting, but it was, I believe in September, and council provided direction to staff to work on those 1041 regulations. Related to those regulations, there is a requirement that you, as a council, identify either the activities or the areas of state interest that you would like to regulate and be part of your 1041 process. And so at that meeting, the direction based on recommendation from the community development director is that the activities of state interest that would be regulated is the site selection and construction of major new domestic water and sewage treatment systems and major extensions of existing domestic water and sewage treatment systems. The second area is site selection of arterial highways and interchanges and collector highways. And then the third is site selection and construction of major facilities of this public utility. So there is an ordinance that is part of the consent agenda this evening. The ordinance is on first reading. And that ordinance designates those 3 specific activities that you will regulate as part of this process. There will be a public hearing on this on November 12th. And the state statute requires that you send out a notice of public hearing to entities, individuals that could be affected by this. And we have, town staff has sent out that notice to people entities that could be affected by those 3 different subject matters. Then the other part of the process is development of those regulations. So what are the 1041 regulations? That is also in the work session packets. And those are very detailed. Councilmember Berg asked me on the way in, who is the other person that's listed on the memo related to those regulations, and that's Keith Martin in my office, and he spent time working on those regulations. They are consistent with state statute and really fairly consistent with what other jurisdictions do for their 1041 processes, consistent with what the county does related to 1041. I'll provide a quick overview. For this process, an applicant must set a pre-application meeting with town staff to discuss their project. Following that meeting, then town staff reviews the development and determines whether the development is not likely to have significant effects or the significance of the effects is unknown. And that's called the finding of no significant impact, or FONSI. If there is a FONSI determination, then a 1041 permit is not required and the person may continue with the development. So essentially that's a first look at the process by staff to say, is this something that we need to review further? Is it going to have a significant impacts? If not, then they can continue on with the development without having to go through the process. If a permit is required, then there is an application that must be submitted with all the required information. That's all spelled out in the regulations. The completed application is provided to the Planning and Zoning Commission for review and recommendation. And this is really just the completed application material that the Planning and Zoning Commission is reviewing. It's not going to be a public hearing. Planning and Zoning Commission would then make a recommendation, and then Town Council holds a quasi-judicial public hearing on the application and determines whether the criteria that's spelled out, whether that has been met. The criteria that are in the regulations are set by state statute, and there is some additional Keystone specific requirements, such as ensuring that the activity is designed and developed in a manner that's consistent with the town's comprehensive plan. So that's an overview of the process, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Councilmember Kerr?
I think this might be for Lindsay, if you don't mind. Could you give us an example, as we try to get our head around this, or an explanation of a sewage treatment system that would be an activity of state interest?
That's an excellent question. Hypothetically, a new development comes along and for whatever reason, the Snake River Sanitation District would not take them in. And they'd have to form their own way of treating their own, effluent. Then, that would necessitate a 1041 action.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So can you help us understand, how did you reach a list that you're proposing for this ordinance that is shorter than all the options? Now, having said that, we're probably not in danger of having an airport developed here.
That's how it's.
I know you are, I could hear it. But I am kind of concerned about a possibility of solid waste disposal sites. As an example, and that's one that I'm not seeing on our list.
Another excellent question. Well, the life of the landfill is, I think, has not a lifespan of not 30 years plus, depending on how things are managed. With that being said, currently within the town limits, I don't know where that would be located.
Oh, I agree.
So it would have to be within the limits of the town. So I didn't envision that ever really happening.
And the same is true for the new communities.
That is correct. Again, I don't think there is a location currently or in the near future located within the town boundaries that would be appropriate for that either. So I don't envision that as being a problem.
And is there additional work involved with adding any one of these?
We can always add other,
At later point,
always add.
can we add it when we're already hearing about the threat of something? Okay.
Yes, we can always add it, and that's oftentimes why 1041 regulations get adopted.
Okay.
It is because there's murmurs of a particular development or project, and the municipality wants to have a say, a seat at the table of what that's gonna look like. And so you put a moratorium in place, and then you get your regulations together really quickly, and you get it all together.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I'm very much in favor of seat at the table is the name of the game, right?
It is. I do believe that these three categories are sufficient for our immediate needs.
Other questions? Great. The next item on the agenda is discussion of penalties and fines. Mr. Town Manager?
And once again, I will pass this out to our town attorney.
Okay, so there has been, we've been working on putting in place ordinances, working on adopting traffic regulations. And it's recommended to put in place a standardized penalty and perhaps maybe a fine schedule, so that there is, enforcement behind these different ordinances that you're putting in place. The municipalities have the authority to impose penalties and fines, also to impose jail time. The maximum penalty that a municipality can assess is $2,650 per state statute. That was set in 2014. It is subject to inflation. I haven't done the numbers and I don't know many other, I don't know anybody who has, but we can do the numbers if we wanted to set it higher. You could set your maximum penalty higher than 2650. With inflation, the maximum jail sentence is 364 days under the state statute. That would apply to really only criminal type offenses. Keystone hasn't really put into place any criminal type offenses. So the recommendation here is just to get together a simple ordinance that sets forth that any violations would be subject to penalties. Maximum penalty is, $26.50. For your nuisance type ordinances, it's also important to say that that penalty can be assessed per day. So that it's $26.50 per day of the violation. In most cases, you wouldn't end up assessing that much, but it's nice to be able to have that as an option to educate people that they need to come into compliance.
Councilmember Sullivan.
I just want to make a comment. One of the options that talked about earlier was giving the town the option to, there's a violation, to connect with them first
Yes.
and talk. And that they talked about that as an option. I guess my thought is I'd like to include that.
So you could include it in the ordinance. I would say that maybe that's more of direction from town council to staff in terms of enforcement. In that, there's can be like think about it as a pyramid, and enforcement starts with education and request for voluntary compliance. The next step, that's what you do with most people. Then most people comply. The next step is to send a notice. And then you send your notice out to a smaller number of people who haven't yet complied. And then it goes all the way up to, municipal court violation. I don't know that that is necessarily something that's typically written into the ordinance, just because you want to have some flexibility in enforcement, or maybe something that is very egregious.
Yeah, I do. I guess that's it. I just wanted to make sure we had flexibility to have that stuff at the bottom of the pyramid, as you said, option to spare.
So, if I could add to that, from a zoning, violation standpoint, it's always good. If at the end of the day, we're gonna end up in court, it's always good to document, the cooperative nature of trying to resolve the issue. And that is usually through a series of letters, with set internal deadlines. So, this is where we like to do things from a zoning perspective.
Councilmember Kerr.
Well, I think I'm just adding to the choir or the chorus here. I really urge that we do default to a fine schedule as opposed to court summons for the practicality and timeliness of it. I think this is what you're proposing. Yes.
It's not really, actually. So there's different ways to levy fines on somebody for violations. You can go through a municipal court process, or you can do it in an administrative manner. That the administrative manner is something that we can discuss, but we need to put a whole process in place to do it through an administrative fashion. In terms of town staff issuing a fine versus writing a citation and having the person show up in court.
Let me explain where I'm coming from. A year ago this week, Val Police went to the Val Town Council and said, we'd like you to give us authority to stop issuing summons to come to court for two kinds of offenses that they were regarding. One was about stolen ski passes, and the other one was about violations of the town's wildlife-related trash regulations. And they pointed out that especially in a ski town where so many of the people who might be making these violations are out of town, and it's a challenge to get them up here to go to court, and it's court costs for us. The second example I want to point to is when Councilmember Davis and I sat in the policy committee for the Colorado League of, municipal league. There were multiple municipalities who were complaining about court costs. And their point was there were so many no-shows. And the examples they gave were criminal, but that's not where I'm going here. The point they were making is they still have to pay for the court costs, whereas fines, a system of fines is more streamlined and more effective. Can this be part of what we're talking about?
It could be. I mean, this is a huge conversation.
Okay.
So, you know, the core operation of a court is through collection of your fines that you get from summons and complaints. Typically, everybody who comes to court is assessed at the court cost. You know, $30 that's tacked onto that helps pay for the cost of running the court. And people who don't show up for court, the fines are still entered, and that money then is sent to collections. And so that you can still collect against people who don't show up. I have information on collection numbers from other jurisdictions, and they're often quite high from collection agencies. I don't know how it works in every other place. So that's a big conversation. Administrative fines is definitely something that we can do. That is, again, maybe a bigger discussion. I don't know if there are the administrative resources for administrative fines, and that might be, a question for the town manager as to whether there is staff to handle the administrative fines.
I know we're not making decisions tonight. This is informational. I appreciate it. But I would like to pursue this and not simply dismiss it just because it could be a burden. Let's find out how much a burden it is. And we can rely on the life experience of our staff in the future as they make these recommendations.
What do you think, Mr. Town Manager?
We can make it work. We can do this.
Well,
Yeah.
I think the question was
Yeah.
explore it. Yeah, explore it. And perhaps have it part of the discussion when you come up with something.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Well, and this is really, it's a two-part process. I don't think they're not mutually exclusive. You do need to put in place this ordinance that I'm talking about that says that it's a violation of your code. This is the penalty. I mean, this is something that when you work with the law enforcement, they're going to want to have, is this in place already? And then the second piece of it would be whether you do an administrative process.
And could that administrative process, I saw in another item we're going to be discussing in a few minutes, of the bear trash ordinance. The process that was laid out there started out with an administrative process with some fines, and then when that was unsuccessful, it flowed into the municipal court process.
and I think that's, first of all, we're in negotiations to set up a municipal
Yeah.
court. So with Silverthorne. So we will have a municipal court. And I think that's the way it needs to be, like Councilmember Kim pointed out, some things is, we don't need to make everything a criminal violation.
But you would like the option at some point, if you're unsuccessful on the administrative side, to be able to refer it into the,
Yeah, and the burden on staff would not be,
to handle it in that manner.
over.
Councilmember Permit,
I like the idea of having some discretion and some sensibility about where you split it, and then, but you may also need to bring some of these eventually to criminal redress.
Sure.
And, you know, the example of Vail, where they have, a lot of ski pass, that is from people out of state. But, the courts do virtual appearances, which is the way that that's usually handled.
Councilmember Higgins.
Thanks. I just wanted to kind of share an idea, food for thought, look into feasibility. So as we consider a new fine structure and look into our town, I encourage everyone here to explore innovative approaches such as an income-based fine structure for the fine structure that we're looking at to ensure fairness and justice for all residents. If you look at other towns, and I did extensively on their fine structures, you see that they've adopted a unified fine structure where everyone, regardless of income, pays the same penalty for violations. While it may seem straightforward, it often results in a system that disproportionately impacts low-income individuals, while wealthier offenders can absorb those costs without meaningful consequences. So an income-based fine structure would offer a solution by adjusting penalties according to the offender's ability to pay. And this would ensure that fines are equally felt across all income levels, promoting fairness and accountability for everyone. Other countries have been successful in other areas of the United States with this approach. For many years, the case studies and the academic articles I read were saying over a century, providing that income-based fines are not only showing fairness, but also improve compliance and fine collection rates. So as we consider what structure to adopt, it's important to remember that a one-size-fits-all fine system can leave low-income residents facing burdens that push them into a cycle of debt. And while wealthier individuals can pay without second thought. That said, I understand that under current state law, we do have a limitation and cap of the $26.50 per occurrence, subject to inflation. This cap would naturally limit the potential size of fines for higher income individuals. However, even with these constraints, an income-based system can still be effective by adjusting fines proportionally up to the legal maximum and would ensure that all offenders face penalties that reflect their financial situation while still complying with state regulations. I urge you all to think beyond the traditional models and consider an income-based fine structure that truly reflects fairness and equality. Thank you.
Any thoughts on that, town attorney?
Well, I mean, I have a couple of thoughts. One is how, I haven't, looked into that and adopting it. But, my initial thought is, how do you identify who fits into what category and what information do you use to make that determination? The other thought is that with fines that are imposed by a judge, the judge always has discretion to change the fine that's imposed based on somebody's ability to pay. And either the judge can reduce the fine if the person says, they don't have an ability to pay, maybe they're a first-time offender, or the judge can set payment plans. But I don't know how it would be determined somebody's income level in terms of maybe a higher income to make that determination.
Any other comments or questions?
If I can address that point too.
Sure.
I I'm a big fan of income-based funds. I loved when that billionaire was in Norway, got fined something like $780,000 for a speeding ticket. However, with our, which he probably had in his pocket, but with our really tight limit, the 2650, it would be an excessive burden on staff to try to break this out for administrative fines.
Councilmember Parmet.
I echo that sentiment, and I compliment, Councilmember hanging out on his attempt to bring some innovative thought to justice. Cause that is something that we can focus on as a 21st century town. At the same time, it could be pretty burdensome, whether you're low income or high income, to, if you have a parking ticket and having to turn over your tax returns and bank accounts and investment accounts to the town so that they can determine what you owe.
Can I just make another comment on this?
Yes.
I think that too, this type of thing does play out a little bit in terms of how the court process, particularly with nuisance. So if a nuisance is taken to court, generally speaking, you just want compliance with your nuisance violations. You want the nuisance gone. But if you have maybe a corporate entity who is not being compliant for months and months and months, that's where you can then use your 2650 for every day that the violation exists. And you can ask the judge for, a $50,000 penalty. And I have done that in cases.
So a follow-up on that, right, even if we do establish that a corporate entity is breaking an ordinance and the ordinance fine is $50 in our code, we could, in theory, ask the court to increase that cost based on extenuating circumstances, such a flagrant corporate entity that's violating the code.
A lot of times you set the fine as a minimum fine is 50. So it just depends on how it's worded. But it's good to have flexibility when you're drafting your ordinance and to allow for that type of situation.
Other comments? I guess you're looking for some direction now. And I'm not sure where we have come down. If we've asked questions, yes, Councilmember Kerr?
Propose, you have 4 recommendations, 4 bullets. I think I would recommend that we change bullet 4 to say, consider adopting a fine schedule and a municipal court judge power to establish a fine schedule or something like that. Just make that, instead of a one or the other, then a tiered approach, as we have spoken.
And what you're talking about, though, is the fine schedule is administrative.
Okay, correct words, yes.
Because you can tell your judge, these are the fines that we want associated with these types of offenses. You can do that as counsel, because you can put in place a fine schedule and tell the judge that this is what you want to apply.
Okay, good to know.
Yes.
But I'm standing by my recommendation that we ask staff to look at this idea of a tiered administrative and court approach.
Okay.
Also, in your staff report, you opened up with a statement that has 2 purposes, that the purpose of these fines and penalties are intended to promote compliance and fair and consistent enforcement. I would urge that you probably were already going to include that, but I would urge you to do that to clarify that we do not look at this as revenue production.
Okay, got it.
Mr. Town Manager, did you have something, your comment?
I was just going to comment that as we bring forth, the various ordinances that will impose fines and things like that, will outline in those ordinances. Some of them will just be the general penalty. Some of them, you as a council will want to see a tiered level with quite possibly a lower maximum than the general penalty. So we'll be addressing these fines also with each ordinance we bring forward, like the nuisance ordinance.
Right, so let me try this as guidance. The guidance would be to go ahead and draft a proposed ordinance on fines and penalties, given the conversation that you've heard here today, as muddled as it was, and bring that back to us, potentially in a work session. Is that acceptable?
Yeah.
And what you believe is the right thing to do.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is discussion of regulations relating to bear safety. Mr. Town Manager.
And I apologize for not getting this out to us last week. Dealing with a lot of insurance issues, but I've emailed you all a draft bear ordinance. As I was telling the mayor earlier, as I poured over actually an excessive number of bear and refuse ordinances, it's kind of amazing how many of these mountain towns cut and pasted from each other. They're all very similar ordinances. And as another side, I don't know if any of you saw the picture of the bear caught on the Durango wildlife camera yesterday. This bear is as big as all of us combined. It was one of the baddest bears I've ever seen. Still, there are issues. So pull my screen up. I guess I've presented a draft ordinance. It's got some language that I drafted it like it's going to be codified. So we refer to chapter issues like that. I'll clean that up in the ordinance and we'll stick it back in when we codify all our ordinances in the near future. But we'll kind of go through it, and please bring up any questions, any issues you saw. And the first thing we're defining the big terms. Attractant are considered any substance which is expected to attract wildlife. I mean, wildlife, and we're not just talking bears, but clearly bears are the biggest offenders, the biggest issues here. Crows are a pretty darn big issue at getting into trash too. They would be covered under this. Eventually, if climate change keeps happening, we'll have raccoons and such up here too.
We have raccoons.
Okay, I haven't seen them yet. Okay.
It's a newer thing in the last couple of years.
Yeah. But this applies to any wildlife, and attractants are those things that generally we mean food, food type things that will get that bear to go to that trash can specifically, as opposed to just general refuse, which is waste, which could still attract wildlife. Later in there, we discuss refuse, which does not attract wildlife, like lawn waste, things like that. Dumpster enclosure, and this is a big one, a fully enclosed structure, 4 sides, a roof, secure door and cover, latching door that prevents access from wildlife, and meets all of our code requirements. If it's over 120 feet, it would require a building permit. Under 120 square feet, it won't. Most dumpster enclosures are going to be well under 120 square feet. And this is not just a cover with a door that animals can go above or below. This is a fully enclosed structure that will keep wildlife out. refuse container is just any sort of garbage can, whether it's wildlife proof or not. When we dive into the restrictions or not, I've in the draft allowed for just non-wildlife proof refuse containers. However, those need to be kept inside except on collection days. So if you have a garbage can, you don't necessarily need to buy a wildlife proof one. You just can't leave that garbage can out. Wildlife proof refuse container is a true wildlife proof container. There's all sorts of organizations that certify them. I've just called out Park Service, Forest Service, and did not read Division of Wildlife, but Parks and Wildlife, Colorado Parks and Wildlife. There's actually some combination divisions that exist to specifically to certify things like wildlife resistant containers. So those are all the definitions. And then we'll kind of go into the rules in this draft. And we start out with residential containers. So all containers that receive refuse edible by wildlife, and wildlife can eat all sorts of refuse, will be required to be kept in a home or garage, unless it is a wildlife proof refuse container, or is enclosed in a dumpster enclosure is defined under these terms. Residents with curbside pickup can put it out no earlier than 6 a.m. in the morning of the scheduled pickup, and pick up by 8 o'clock, take the cans back in by 8 o'clock on the same day. As I was discussing with the mayor earlier, we understand there are going to be occasional empty cans left out by people who just came home and forgot to bring their garbage can back in. Issues like that, we're much more concerned about the refuse containers that have food and waste in them as opposed to the empty ones. That being said, we don't need bears walking through the neighborhoods, tipping over every empty can, learning to look for food. Other household waste, as I talked about earlier, like yard waste, trees, branches, things like that, is generally exempted from these regulations unless it's commingled, and then it's subject to the regulations. Multi-family developments are required to have wildlife proof containers or a enclosure, a dumpster enclosure. Any questions or comments so far? Those are the real, this is the basic piece right here.
Councilmember Sullivan.
Well, just a supplement. They put the trash out by 7 in the morning. When do they start collecting trash?
Our trash, we're often racing out the door at 7 in the morning to make some code.
The operators say 5-7. Yeah, I'm making this. It's not their fault.
Okay, so, and we, I mean, moving in an hour, so I'm just curious. I mean, I hate to be, but I know a lot of people put it out the night before because of the early trash pickup. But if that's not an issue,
That would be not one there. And for a good reason, that's, the bears know that's when the food is in the cans.
yeah, but they don't pick up till after 7. You just need to wake up on Wednesday mornings before 7 to put it out. What we're saying.
Yeah.
Councilmember Permit.
Point is well taken. I think the solution here is to make the exception there. Those hours, don't have to apply if your trash can is wildlife proof. That way, the night shifter doesn't have to worry about, well, who's going to put my can out at 7 a.m. because I'm working from midnight to noon. And people can put their trash can out the night before if it's convenient, so long as it is wildlife proof. Similarly, on the pickup, that same night shifter who needs to come by and well, now they're on their next shift, but the trash can come before they left. Okay, we've got an empty trash can, but like you said, we don't wanna like have good smells being in the trash can. I would recommend, in addition to saying outside that hours, it must be bear proof, a stipulation to trash operators or the refuse operators must close bear proof cans at pickup. So that's really simple. They dump it, they put it down. And all of them should be auto latching, which is a definition question that I would also mention is that, that any wildlife proof container should be something that automatically latches. You want things to fail safe. Additionally, I was warned by some other municipalities that they've spent inordinate amounts of time talking about what a fully enclosed structure actually means. You know, there's a lot of enclosed structures around that the bears can climb into a gap or the raccoons can get in through a gap. So maybe if we could, it would probably save us a future headache to tighten up that definition a little bit to avoid future questions. That's also hard, and except awesome work.
Trash kills bears.
Trash goes bears.
Hey, just write these notes here quick. Okay.
Oh, Councilmember Hagman.
Thanks. I love the idea and where this is going. I do have concerns about the implementation date, early January. And then I do have questions if there's an estimate for the cost of curbside residents to comply with these regulations if they do not have an indoor storage location. So what does that bear proof bin look like? In my mind, I'm imagining the ones that, you know, the Park Service joked is just hard enough so humans can get in still while bears can't. But those are like thousands of dollars, right? So is there a more economical option for a lot of our citizens that might not have garages?
Councilmember Permit.
The one I purchased was roughly 400. There are options to modify some existing cans. If you have a very sturdy can, you can generally make a modification that's around $50-ish, that may make it wildlife proof. And there are also grants out there, from the state, to offset those bin costs. I haven't looked into those, but that's what, the county commissioners told me when I said, hey, you're putting in this so-called pay-as-you-throw thing. What about the people who already paid for a larger bear-proof dumpster that they never fill up? Now you're saying, go pay for a smaller bear-proof dumpster. And I replied was, go get a grant, essentially.
And then, if I may, I actually had talked to the mayor about this earlier today. And we'll see how it works out. There's manager discretion to an extent, and if necessary, if we're finding that this is proving to be a real difficult financial burden to people, I likely will come to the council and ask us to set up a grant program to help people.
Councilmember Sullivan.
Yeah, I guess along those lines, man, I'm certainly conscientious of an individual that might spend $400, that might be a pain. But I'm also interested to know the impact to the commercial folks, you know, because you know, especially the food processing folks, that, you know, hopefully they've thought about this already, and hopefully in town, most of them do this. But is there a way that we can understand the financial impact of this, before we vote on the regulation? You know, at all the various levels, and get input from constituents?
Yeah, and actually, I had this exact conversation before too, and before the final ordinance is brought up to workshop even. I'm going to be reaching out to our commercial entities to the extent possible, reaching out to Vail Resorts, to the chamber, some of our individual restaurants, I'll reach out to make sure they're aware of the discussion going on and can come in and contribute their knowledge to it. And to that extent, you'll see that my timeline of implementation, I put April 15th for commercial and August, or April something, I can't remember. April for commercial, August for residential. But I also, in that case, allow town manager discretion on enforcement. So if people are having a problem, whether it's commercial or individual, they can come in and talk to me and we can, it needs to be done. Financial burden aside, it needs to be done, but we can figure out a way to make sure it works for these commercial and businesses.
Councilmember Higginbotham.
2 point, generally speaking, I'd, beyond the cost perspective, also building over the winter and getting a new structure right by April 15th, I feel like would be challenging for some of our HOAs, for example. But I do appreciate the fact that there is the, provision, for town manager discretion. I lost my second. Cool, thank you.
I can answer that too. Thought about that, talked about that. If we had an August deadline, no matter what, I think we need town manager discretion at some extent. But if we had an August deadline, people would be coming in August, asking for town manager discretion. And at that point, we'd miss the fall feeding season. So I understand that it's going to be difficult to meet that April deadline, but they better come in and talk to me by April and let's have a plan to get this done as soon as possible, was my thought.
Councilmember Davis.
Most HOAs have dumpsters, and I think that's almost a requirement if you're having STRs. So, I don't think it's gonna be an issue for HOAs. It may be for individual homes that do not have garages.
With my, I'm imagining the structures needed to cover those dumpsters that aren't there for free.
Most of the HOAs actually have bear-proof dumpsters and bear-proof enclosures already.
Okay.
That I know ours, in fact, I don't know of any off the top of my head that don't have.
I mean, yeah, where I live 4 or 5 around me, like whenever I walk my dog, every single one is not bear proof, so.
Then that, again, that goes back to, they should be on your list of folks that you notify. There are options in the area of bear proof, with the craft companies. I know I just saw one, this week over in Wilderness that would meet the bear proof requirement that isn't in a building. Councilmember, did you have something from it?
I think a lot of the enclosures out there already are probably also compliant, except for maybe if we do want to have some sort of auto closing system, so that you aren't reliant upon every single STR guest to remember to latch the door. So some of these may just need so much as a closure spring. Once you have nothing, well, they'll have a little more work to do, but this is the right thing to do, and it does actually get done. Because trash bills bears. Are you gonna go through the rest of it? I may have a few other comments.
I am, but we can take your comment. Okay. So maintenance and operation, tight timeline if it's damaged. Especially if it's an enclosure, it might be able to be repaired in that time. If a bear somehow manages to wreck your wildlife proof container, which happens, there's almost no way you'll get it repaired in 48 hours, but it's the same sort of thought here. You talk to me, the idea is get the ball rolling, get the problem solved as soon as practical. Can't really write that into an ordinance. You have to have a date certain, otherwise as soon as practical becomes 3 years from now.
I think that when, the code enforcement officer came by, the, Dos Locos dumpster, they told them you have 24 hours to fix it.
Yeah. Yep.
When was that? With those letters,
Oh, when, whatever day I sent this original email,
This was our code enforcement officer.
the one from the SO.
Oh, okay, so,
oh,
Yeah,
that explains a lot.
I was not referring to you.
I made a visit as well, and some other businesses in that general location. I was not all that warmly received.
Councilmember Kerr.
Should we distinguish between this idea of an enclosure around a dumpster and a dumpster that is truly not wildlife proof?
For instance, our dumpster here is a wildlife proof dumpster and container, and would still fall, even though it's a dumpster, it would fall under our definition of a wildlife proof
Okay,
refuse.
so we are not requiring to build an enclosure if their dumpster is indeed wildlife proof.
Correct.
Okay, that's good, because I share John's concern with the costs. But related to that, in the definitions part, where it talks about you can use an enclosure for your dumpster, presumably a dumpster that's not bear proof. I'm afraid that 4 walls is going to be target only certain types of wildlife that can't climb. So if the dumpster itself is not wildlife proof, I believe it needs, the better language would be so enclosed completely.
It's got a roof.
No, but it doesn't specify that. It only
doesn't.
asks for 4
Yeah,
walls, and that's just a
I'm gonna,
playground for a bear.
I'm gonna tighten up that definition quite a bit.
Well,
Any other? Councilmember Hagan.
Just a question and, wondering about the potential for this in the future. Have we looked at partnering with the big players, right? The ones that come to mind is Waste Management and Timberline, about having wildlife proof options for communities that do not want to build a new structure and might not have a wildlife proof option, or for individual residents as well that might have a curbside bin that might not be wild proof but is looking for the option.
We will definitely be reaching out to those companies, and they're kind of difficult to work with on this issue. I found in other jurisdictions, they might be different here, but the point is they have to comply. If they're not supplying the correct containers to their customers are the ones who can really put the pressure on them even more than the town. So one issue, I call out compactors here because I've had experience of dragging our compactor down from the outpost, very big in the snowcat. Compactors, basically, you just close them and they are bear proof, and we specifically call that out here. And these are large dumpster compactors that we're talking about. Let me see, there was one, I really wanted to get to here, and it is construction site refuse disposal. This is, not all of the ordinances have this in the towns. I think it's a pretty important one. They use basically 20-30 yard roll off dumpsters uncovered. If they're filled with construction waste, that's perfectly fine and okay. The problem is all the workers throw their food scraps in there too. So this ordinance specifically calls out that construction sites will have to have a wildlife proof refuse container.
But that doesn't require them to, that just means they have to have refuse-proof container to contain their employees' waste.
Yeah, they can have a
That
small,
30-yard
yeah,
one does not have to be.
I met with one today, this issue. And, you know, they understand their employees, they do dump stuff in there. A lot of other people dump stuff in there. And so the challenge for them is that they're not gonna be put on the spot for other people dumping stuff in their dumpster. And that was, they were concerned about how the regulation would address that.
yeah, and, you know, that'll have to be a issue by issue thing. If they have a wildlife proof container sitting out there beside their dumpster,
They're very concerned about this.
yeah, and rightfully so, but it's, you know, it's tough to regulate something like this where you can have an unknown third party creating problems unknown to the contractors themselves. And I guess the best I can say is I don't imagine there will be a lot of enforcement if we find they have a wildlife proof container that they are using and very little food trash in their dumpster that could clearly have been put there by someone else. However, if they don't have that wildlife container, they can't say it's all other people dumping bin. We know our workers are taking their trash home with them. I've pounded nails, that's not how it works.
It will be an issue.
Yeah.
Can I ask you to investigate that particular issue? I know Summit County's just gone through this process. How they've handled, other towns in Summit County have handled this issue of construction sites. They had to have addressed it.
A lot of them just kind of let that one slide. But it's a problem. It is a problem. And, you know, I was thinking in this one, it might be feasible for the town to purchase a few wildlife resistant containers, which we can rent out to contractors and stuff who don't necessarily have to have this requirement in many other towns. Issues like that, just workarounds to help them.
Councilmember Kerr.
I've had the joy of close construction for a long time, and yet they picked up their trash and they took it away in their cars. So we do have some concern about making everyone pay for the few who do not police up after themselves. So as a minimum, let's explore this idea of renting something out at a very reasonable rate. Thanks.
Comments? Councilmember Davis.
In my experience with contractors, and I have way too much, because we do a lot of renovation on our property and a lot of our neighbors do individual renovation. They'll just tack the price on to the cost of the job.
See, Mr. Town Manager.
Okay, commercial, basically, we've already discussed this, the same rules, and these are the ones I'm gonna be reaching out to. These are the real problems. Now, restaurant dumpsters, the wildlife knows where the good food is. So we'll be reaching out, getting their input, but these are the ones that are our biggest concern. I've added here, and not everyone has this, the feeding of wildlife prohibited. I got a STR in Yosemite once, walked in the front door, and there were 3 bears on the back porch eating out of a plate of ribs that had been left outside. I probably put outside to attract the bears so that the previous runners or such could see them. It is a problem. I think we should have this in here. The feeding, we have exemptions for all sorts of things, including bird feeders or those people who deal with wildlife are you know, the putting out bait to trap the beavers, things like that. Those people obviously will be exempted from that. Then we come to enforcement. First thing is basically a warning, a notice of violation. And this is all, this section especially is up to you. We can alter this however we need it. But, notice of violation, get it cured. Here's the law, here's the rule, here's what you need to do. Second notice of violation will impose a fine. I left the fines blank, but I'm seeing something like just $100 fine, enough so that people are aware they can't do this, but not so much that it is overwhelming. Second violation, I'm thinking somewhere around a $200 to $400 fine. And the third violation, you go to court and let the judge throw the book at you because you're obviously not learning the message the council's trying to get across to you. Any comments,
Councilmember Permit?
This sounds great. I guess I just have the question about, say, a dumpster at a multi-family dwelling or business. Who gets the fine? Is it the property management company? Is it the building owner? Or is it whoever they say, you know, this tenant's renter or employee is the one who?
Whoever contracts with the waste disposal company. So whoever is responsible for supplying it.
So then they're responsible for enforcing the downstream property.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right. Councilmember Curry.
Sorry, I know we already talked about, you have the experience of one, wildlife proof container that was $4,400. What did I say?
44.
Oh, no, I tripped over my own words, $400. Has anybody done any research so that we understand what we are requiring? If not, I will. Do we already know the kind of the range of costs that we're giving people?
I'll have
I'll
to
to
see.
see on
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't have it.
Well, I have a comment. I did try to do research and I'd like,
You can't.
I couldn't find any that was actually certified bear proof. It was companies claiming that it was bear proof, right? And you know, my Yeti claims it's bear proof too, but I'm not gonna leave that out there and let a bear get at it, right? So if we could have like, maybe even a list of these are vendors or these are items that we're saying are bear proof would be great, because I don't know, garbage can companies claiming it's bear proof, but I don't know if it actually is. And I don't want to spend $500 to figure out if that's not.
Yeah. Well, and they change. And we can't have a definitive list. So that's why the Forest Service, the Park Service, some interagency groups, Parks and Wildlife do define and identify bear proof containers. And we won't leave it up to the garbage company claiming it's bear proof. I've seen plastic lids on dumpsters that they've said are bear proof, and bears know how to bounce up and down on a plastic lid and punch it down through into the dumpster. It's, you know, we'll have to look at them case by case and tell the truth. There might be people who are welders and want to build their own.
I think what Councilmember Hagan was asking is, prior to us voting on an ordinance, to have an idea of what the potential financial implications are.
Yeah.
Not necessarily to have a list of those sitting out there for use, because that'd be a constant update issue.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And by next time I bring this forward, we'll have ranges of cost for smaller containers up to dumpster size containers, and the various more examples of what's considered a wildlife proof container too.
Proceed.
That's basically it, other than some sections that say, you know, regardless of the penalties and everything above, you still have to deal with cleaning up after yourself. And if we see a problem that's exempted, like you have bird feeders, which we've exempted, but the bears have found your bird feeders, you're still gonna have to remove it. Then we come to our time periods. Like I said April 15th and August 1st, April 15th for, any container required, April 15th, any enclosure by August 1st. I think and I don't know, how do you want to do this? Would we rather define it by commercial and residential? How would we like to implement this?
Councilmember Parmet first.
I like what you have written, previous question on the violator's responsibility. Do we need something in there that specifies that they also have to clean up if the bear gets in and spreads a bunch of dirty diapers and shredded trash bags around?
Yes.
Awesome.
Councilmember Kerr.
I think I misunderstood something he said. Okay.
All right. Any other comments or suggestions? All right, then go forth and draft an ordinance for us to consider.
Trash kills bears.
All right.
There you go.
All right, the next item is the discussion of mayor council issues, and I would propose that we just address one and then address the others in the normal council meeting. The only one is the West Hills HOA meeting that's coming up on the 24th. I've had some discussion with council member Parmet, who is available to attend that meeting. And so my recommendation, subject to a thumbs up from you guys, is that council member Parmet attend with council member Davis, and then council member Hagenow would attend one or more, would be welcome to attend one or more of the HOA meetings that are upcoming of November 2nd at Oro Grande, 14th at Ironwood, and the 14th of December at Starfire. And of course, we're still looking for anyone else who might be interested in those other three.
I'm doing the last two, so
Yeah.
whoever wants to join me would be great.
I could potentially do Oral Grande, if you say again the date.
It's the 14th, or
No,
the second,
November
it's
2nd.
November 2nd.
Fine.
Work that out directly with Councilmember Davis.
Oh, I'm not doing it, Brian.
Oh,
I would,
yeah, work with the town manager.
No.
All right. So you're for O'Brien?
The concept.
Oh, the concept. All right, is that concept okay with everyone? Thumbs up?
Yes.
That's fine. With that, since it is now 6:25, I think, roughly, I'll declare the meeting adjourned. And we will break and come back again at 7 o'clock for the council meeting.